Hello, everyone. Welcome to A Child Like Me. My name is Kama Mahako. Today, I'm going to do a continuation of a story that I started sharing with you about Mrs. Marina Allison and her experience having lost a baby to Reyes syndrome or Rise syndrome. You can check the channel for part one. Um, a very touching story, and I'm grateful to Mrs. Allison for deciding to share this story with the world, to share the story with us all, because prior to her reaching out to me, I had no knowledge of Reye's syndrome. And now I am aware and trying to get others to be aware of how this can affect not just babies, not just toddlers, but children in general up to age 18. So we all should be aware of this. Unfortunately, Mrs. Allison lost her baby at 9.5 months old. You can listen to her story on that video as well as this video. This particular video, I'm going to actually share with you Mrs. Allison's diary, her journal that she kept during the time when her baby Casey took ill and her stay in the hospital and subsequently her passing. So Mrs. Allison was very meticulous and very expressive in keeping this journal, and now she has decided to share this with us. So I'm going to be reading the actual words from her diary and sharing with you also some pics. So I'm going to share my screen now so we can look at Mrs. Allison's journal. All right, so this is a mother's diary on losing her baby to Reye's syndrome, a very rare and fatal illness. And this is baby Casey John Marie Allison. Baby Casey at 9.5 months old, she passed away from complications of Reye's syndrome. This is her mom. This is what she looks like today, Mrs. Marina Allison. Casey would have been 31 years old this year. All right, so this is Mrs. Allison and Casey. Casey had two older siblings, a brother and a sister. And there she is, 31 years ago, or 30 years ago in this picture here. All right, so this is the actual journal, November 20, 2008. So this particular post was written in 2008. So this would have been about 14 years after. Yeah. Casey passed in 1994. So this particular entry was much later. And it says, Lost Angel, losing my daughter to a rare disease. A folder inside my chest of drawers is stuffed with poems. Some of these poems tell of anguish, heartbreak, tears, and even of suicidal thoughts. Other poems speak of hope, prayers, memories of my daughter Casey. who died at the age of 9.5 months. My tragic, traumatic experience began one night during which Casey cried incessantly, and nothing I did could comfort her, neither her bottle, diaper change, lullaby singing, nor cuddling. The next morning, I rushed with Casey to my family doctor as she had a high fever. She also appeared to be suffering from pain. The medicine my doctor prescribed, however, caspectate, I think, and babycetamol, did not seem to help Casey get better, and the next day I took her to a pediatrician who recommended that I immediately carry her to the Bustamante Children's Hospital. Casey was admitted there, suffering from a fever that eventually escalated to 104 degrees Fahrenheit. She also was not taking her milk and had diarrhea. Unfortunately, I had to leave Casey alone with the staff on the ward as I had to return home with my other two children who had accompanied me to the pediatrician's office and the hospital. They were 8 years and 6 years old. When we visited the hospital, the pediatrician in charge informed me that Casey was in the X-ray department undergoing tests. Completely alarmed and almost frantic, I asked why. I was told the doctors suspected meningitis and they would also be doing a CAT scan and a spinal tap. These tests proved inconclusive, and so Casey was admitted to the intensive care unit since her condition had worsened. When her dad and myself donned our green gowns, gauzy shoes, and hairnets and entered the ICU and saw our darling little wash belly with a bandage area on her little spine from the spinal tap, we cringed at the thought of the pain that she would have incurred. We could not talk in words, she understood, as she was not yet talking. Moreover, she was comatose. We held her hand and sang her lullabies even after we sank into the oblivion of a she sank, sorry, into the oblivion of a deeper coma. On our second day at the ICU, us having slave driver like bosses did not allow us to visit and stay with Casey, as we would have been fired, as we would have liked, sorry. All the expert doctors on the ward were puzzled as to the nature of her illness and could only administer liquids through an IV needle as she lay in the ICU bed, hooked up by tubes to a respirator. Since there was no diagnosis, they could not treat her properly for a successful recovery. Despite the prayers of friends, relatives, co workers, and myself, Casey died after a 5-day stay at the Children's Hospital. I was at home with her older brother and sister when I received the phone call from the hospital. My heart, I swear, dropped straight down to my toes, and the place where my heart used to be had no life. The place where my heart used to be felt as if a knife, well sharpened, was being used to pierce through its walls. I felt the knife twisting and turning continually. I cried out in absolute agony to the Almighty, to Casey's dad, my friends, anyone I felt could help put my heart back into its place after it had been mended of its broken fragments. I had heard of broken hearts. Now I knew exactly what it felt like to have one. I wept constantly, bitterly. I worriedly considered whether my baby had felt extreme pain. I trembled and winced at the thought of her agony as an innocent, alone child, as various tests had been performed on her body. Because she had died at a government hospital, her autopsy was performed by the government pathologist. It took a long time to receive the results. I was in the throes of frustration from waiting almost 1 long year before the autopsy results informed me that Casey, my beautiful baby, had succumbed to the rare disease called Reye's syndrome. Her brain and liver were pronouncedly fatty. My mind has been especially tormented by guilty thoughts of what I could have done as her mother to possibly save her or make her transition less painful. For one, as a voracious reader, I had already been aware that Reye's syndrome was a possible cause, but I did not suggest it to the doctors. Other guilt-laden, torturous thoughts. I shouldn't have left her alone at the hospital, and I should have carried her to the pediatrician at the first symptom of high fever. Whenever I go to bed at night and have a dream about Casey, I see her being cared for by someone who hands her over to me for a while. The dream usually ends when I return her to this guardian. It's like she's an angel. She brought us so much joy with her sweet appearance, her quiet ways, and mischievous antics. As her mom, I used to love cuddling her, singing songs that were playing on the radio. Who knows, maybe now she's enjoying the heavenly sounds of an angelic choir with the rest of the returning celestial beings. Love. So, this part of the journal is actually from the days of Casey's illness, 1994. So, it's Monday, January 10, 1994. Came in from work this evening. Noticed that Casey, the baby, is trying her best to get up into a sitting position, especially when she's couched up in a sitting position in her basket or if she's on someone's lap. She's also vocalizing a lot at the top of her lung and larynx capacity, especially in the mornings. It also seems she's teething. Thank God at least she no longer has the stuffy nose in the mornings. April 11, 1994. Daily duties. Wash and boil bottles. John, that's daddy. Make juice, water bottle, mix feed, pack baby bag. Melissa. Wash baby clothes. Me. Make beds. Andrew and Melissa, that's brother and sister. Wash dishes. Andrew. Make and bottle porridge. John. Make breakfast. John. comb Melissa's hair, me, bathe baby, me, catch water, me. Tuesday, the 14th of July, 1994, at the hospital. Casey has been in the intensive care unit at Bustamante Children's Hospital since Monday evening. I felt her a while ago and she's so cold to the touch. The doctor is worried over the fact that she cannot be warmed up and they don't know what her disease is, but it has something to do with her brain. She has a ventilator breathing for her and she's in a true coma, not responding. This would be a lot easier to bear if I had an understanding boss or coworkers. I feel like I want to faint, to scream, to shout, to die. John is smoking like crazy. The doctors want to do a brain scan on Casey to cost $8,000. At hospital, Wednesday, June 15, 1994. I feel as if I have a cavity somewhere inside of me, whether it be my heart or what, I don't know. But I feel as if I am dysfunctional. I am dying inside. Dear Lord, I have prayed, I put my faith in you, but my human weakness causes me to look on the dark side. Or is it just a matter of accepting the inevitable? I have two school-age children already, but the pain is just as terrible at the thought of losing my dear, precious, sweet Casey, my honey. Oh God, oh dear Lord, it hurts so bad. She does not look at the good at the hospital, and only a mother has an inkling of what is and what can be. Dear Father, I should have insisted from the very jerking, the high fever, the sleepiness, that something be done urgently. Now I am going to lose my precious gem, my sweet honey love. Oh, Casey, I do love you so much. Please hang on and be normal and healthy again. Jesus, please, please. At home, June 16, 1994. Oh Lord God, Casey passed away this afternoon after I left the hospital. I was so heavy in my heart, so grieving after I left the hospital. Round about the time that she died, my head started to hurt me. My heart felt heavier than lead, and I had to run over to Miss B to beg a phone call to John. Then I went back inside the house to read the Bible, pray, and fell asleep. When I woke up, Andrew was calling me that Daddy had come. Oh, Casey, Casey, I feel so sorry. I am so sorry. Oh, Lord God, I am so sorry. Please forgive me. Why didn't we get another chance? Why didn't God even listen to my prayers one bit? God, are you listening any at all? Now or before? Please, God, listen and hear me, please. I love that baby. I love that baby girl so much. I love Casey. I love you. Please forgive me if I didn't cuddle you when I should have. Lord, please forgive me. My baby, my precious baby, help me. No, this is a letter that was given to Mrs. Allison on the passing of Casey, stating the time and date and so on. And this is Casey's memorial service and the actual post-mortem report describing Casey as a well-nourished, large female child exhibiting pallor. Right? Now it goes into description in the detail, and it describes the actual damages that were done to her organs and glands as a result of Reye's syndrome. The lungs showed congestion and edema, swelling. The heart was unremarkable. The liver was pale, indicating because a fatty liver is associated with Reye's syndrome. Kidneys were pale, so a lot of the organs were fatty. The adrenal glands showed reduction in size. The spleen was unremarkable. The bowel contained offensive diarrhea that was watery and brown. The pancreas showed no abnormality. For those who want to know the symptoms of Reye's syndrome, as I said, I'm going to put the description, I'm going to put the link for the first video that I did where I interviewed Mrs. Allison, and we also looked at the symptoms, the cause, and so on. I'll put that link in the description. Now, Mrs. Allison, after Casey's passing, she reached out to the Reye Syndrome Foundation of the United Kingdom. And, sometimes you reach out to these organizations, you either they don't get the correspondence because it's so many people trying to reach out to them, or they get it and you are ignored for whatever reason. But in this case, Mrs. Allison received a response, and with her permission, I'm going to read the response to you, as you can also see on the screen. Dear Mrs. Allison, I was very sorry to receive your recent letter and to learn of the death of your daughter Casey nearly 1 year ago. Please accept the sincere sympathy of my wife Gillian and I in your sad loss. From the experience of losing our son, Jonathan, to Reye's syndrome, I can understand something of the heartache that you and your husband are experiencing. Reye's syndrome can be brought about by the use of aspirin. This is sometimes known as classical Reye syndrome. I note the description in your letter as to how the syndrome affected your daughter. First, she, I'm not seeing this properly, she produced illness. Oh, sorry. First, the prodromal illness, followed by a short period of improvement, and then the onslaught of the syndrome. This seems to be a typical feature of Reye syndrome, which contributes to the difficulty of diagnosing the disease. In your letter, I note that you say, I am almost 100% certain that my baby did not take aspirin. From this wording, there seems to be an element of doubt. Perhaps you could clarify this for me. Reye syndrome, on the other hand, can be brought about by an inborn error of metabolism due to an enzyme deficiency. This is known as Reye-like illness, which is said to mimic Reye syndrome. The most I'm not seeing this clearly, or the most common of these rare Reye-like illnesses is medium chain acyl CoA dehydrogenase deficiency. Perhaps this may shed some light on the post-mortem report. It is now possible to be tested for the G985 mutation in the MCAD gene by the provision of a blood sample by both yourself and your husband through your GP, which must be sent to a specialist center. For the remainder of this letter, I am confirming the content to the provision of information which I suggest you read in the order shown. I have endeavored to keep the detail as simple as possible. Nevertheless, you will appreciate that, like most medical matters, it is a complex subject. And it goes on to give information about the syndrome, the different types of ways that it can demonstrate itself. So, I guess reaching out to the National Reye Syndrome Foundation was a way of kind of getting, it wasn't closure because you don't really have closure from losing a child. But I remember at this time, there was no Google, there was no internet that was accessible to the average person where you could just type in and get tons of information. So luckily, Mrs. Allison, as she said, she was a voracious reader and she did a lot of research, but this is prior, this is afterwards because she really did not know prior to what this was all about. And she also decided to reach out to the National Reye Syndrome Foundation and she got a response which was commendable. So, Reye syndrome is associated with the intake of aspirin in children, particularly, and there are other factors that can trigger it. So we went into it in more detail in the first video, which I'll put the link to. So this is baby Casey. This artwork was done by her mom, Mrs. Allison. Very artistic, very, it is clear to me how much love Mrs. Allison had for her baby, for all her children, and the care and the tenderness that she showed as a mother. This comes out very clearly to me. And as I have expressed to her my deep condolence, it's not something I expect that she or any mother will overcome, but hoping that, you know, uh, as days go by, it's been 31 years, but she will continue to find ways to cope and ways to, to continue to thrive as a mother. She has two surviving children, now adults, and grandchildren, two grandchildren, which are her blessings. Right. So this is Mrs. Allison today. This is as she looks now. Right. Loving mother and grandmother. Right. So, it's a very touching story. And I'm really happy that Mrs. Allison decided to share this with us. Knowledge is power. The right information is power. And we have to keep ourselves informed and so that we don't have because we can be proactive and we can put things in place and we can take the necessary steps to prevent. They say prevention is better than cure. Prevention is better than cure. So get the word out, share the video so others can be informed and prevent this kind of thing from happening to another toddler or infant. Reye syndrome is seen in youngsters all the way up to 18, 19 years, right? So spread the word, share the video, and so we can empower ourselves and others.